Come down. Ooh, you make my high come down. Always tripping when you come around. Never have to cut you out like right now. You see, I don't have to drive me. You can say that for your mama. Maybe you should smoke some. Me try the marijuana. I was never you good. The vibe was straight. Showed you a couple of things and they feelings changed. I treated you right. Everything was a gift from a time to your bag and the color on your lip.
Welcome to the Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast, powered by Blue Wire. Shout out to the new company. My name is Michael Sean Dugar. You guys can follow me on whatever Elon Musk is calling that app these days. My ad name has not changed, at Mike Dugar. That is MikeDugar. Shout out to everyone who was either watching or listening on our YouTube channel. Seahawks Man-to-Man is the name of the channel. That's Seahawks Man, the number 2. Man, for all my audio people, just hit pause real quick, shoot over to YouTube, hit subscribe, like, and you can come right back. You know, that's fine. Just that little gesture, though, means the world to us. So thank you in advance. Chris, go ahead and talk to them.
What is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Christopher Kidd. You can follow me on Twitter at CKIDD206, and that's CKid206. And you know what I'm going to say. Go ahead and hop on YouTube, Seahawks Man-to-Man. Go ahead and subscribe, on the road to 4,000. So let's get us there. We are a few days away from the season opener. I believe we can do it, but I need you guys that are listening on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else, just go over there and subscribe. So go ahead and do that today, all right? Seahawks Man-to-Man on YouTube. Mike, what else we got going for this lovely show today?
All right, week 1 is upon us, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to kick that off with someone who knows about Seattle's opponent far more than Chris or I do, joining the show. To talk about the Broncos with us is the homie Nick Kosmider, who covers the Broncos for The Athletic. Nick, what's going on, sir? How are you?
What's good, fellas? Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, yeah. No, happy to have you. It's very fascinating. This is the week 1 matchup for both teams. Again, you know, a lot has changed for both teams since that Monday night game here in Seattle to kick off the 2022 season. That was a good time. I enjoyed myself. I enjoyed watching it back and watching the Manning cast version of that. It's the only time I rewatched the Manning cast. Did you watch that after?
I did because there was, he had the great clip where he was, they were like counting the amount of timeouts that he was calling on that last drive, right? It's like, why is Nathaniel Hackett not calling a timeout? What are they doing? And Payton's just sitting here, because he's still got that Broncos, he's Broncos investor. Right. I think when that deep down that comes out and he just timeout. And, they took one, after deciding that they would just go ahead and kick a 64-yard field goal, a distance at which has never been made at that stadium. So, I mean, golly. I think I randomly think about that. Like, and it's like a running joke in Denver now. If they'll be on a 2-minute drive, like they'll do these 2-minute drives during training camp. And because Hackett's thing, they said before that drive, 46 left hash. If we get 46 left hash, we're in range. And so every time they start a 2-minute drive, I'm like, hey man, 46 left hash. That's all you got to do.
46 left hash. Oh, that's funny. I loved how much of that was a they're just like us moment from Peyton and Eli. That's how, we all have our favorite teams, whether it's football or basketball, hockey, baseball, whatever. You yell at the TV that they're not doing the thing, and there's Peyton, right? They're like, hey guys, come on. What are we doing, folks? He's just like us. He's not even Peyton Manning in that moment. He's just a fan of his team, wondering what the hell is going on. Yeah, electric night in a lot of ways.
Aikman and Buck too were confused. Like they on the regular broadcast, they're like trying not to dog Hackett, but it was just like they didn't know how to call it. It was just wild.
Yeah, very, very peculiar for that man that night. From the Denver perspective, though, how impactful was that trip to Seattle in terms of maybe springboarding everything that eventually unraveled to the point where Hackett and Russ are no longer with the Broncos?
Well, I got a call the next morning after we flew back to Denver from somebody, kind of close to the organization who said, do you think Hackett is going to survive that? And I thought at the time, oh man, that's way too early. Like, I know it was terrible last night, but that is just like, that's an out there, like sky is falling kind of thing. But it was already being talked about in that building where even the the owner, Greg Penner, who at the time they were only a couple months into owning the team, and we're just like, what is that? Like, why did that happen? and so like, it was already like, there was already these seeds of doubt that had been planted. And, you know, our guy Hackett only got to coach 14 more games after that before he was fired. So I would certainly say that it had big ramifications in that, like, you were already worried about the head coach. And then the next week they go at home against the Texans and they win 16-9, but the crowd is like counting down the play clock at the end of the game because they cannot get the play out. And so, yeah, I would, and those issues had started in Seattle, right? Like they had 2 delay of game penalties. They had all kinds of problems with the clock. And it was one of those situations where you're just like, this guy might be in over his head. And so you add that to the fact that, okay, so Russell Wilson, we just got this guy. He's going to now have his second coach in as many seasons. You know, I have this framed photo over here that my mom actually made for me. You know how moms do, but it was, I got the Times cover when I did the story at the end of last year where it said, you know, the Broncos trade for Russell Wilson was a disaster, but blame extends past the quarterback. Like, that was where you saw that the pieces that they thought they had in place for him were just never there. And 2 years later, here we are.
Man, getting that call the day after the first game.
First game. I was floored. Man. It was wild, but it was one of those situations where you're just like, maybe they're onto something. And then by week 4, you're like, oh no, they already knew.
Wow. Yeah, that's I got one more question about the past before we kind of spin it forward. What was it like covering Russell Wilson?
Oh, you know, I mean, it was such a blur of a 2 years, man. Like, and I think it was just 2 different experiences. Like, because when he came in that March of 2022, this was a team obviously that had been wandering in the desert when it comes to quarterbacks ever since Peyton Manning retired. And it was this like, holy cow, they got their guy. They got the 9-time Pro Bowler. Like, you know, they're ready to go now. They have the quarterback piece missing out. And there was so much optimism. And that's already Russ's brand. And so I think that he was able to kind of ride that in there to a degree at which the off-season hype was just, it almost became like toxic positivity in a way, because it was just like they were so, I think, and I don't want to say delusional, but there was just so much about like, this guy is going to fix everything for us, that some of that pressure he put on himself by kind of what he asked for and how he wanted to kind of be looked at as that dude. But I also think they didn't do him any favors either in the construction of the team and the coach they picked out, and then really kind of just like allowing some of the things that they allowed. You know, it all kind of toppled. He was the same guy really throughout. I mean, he didn't change. But I just think ultimately there was just too much change within those 2 years for anybody to be able to handle.
I mean, and we've seen that though. We've seen teams feel like they're a quarterback away, and then the guy shows up, and you learn maybe we're not. The Broncos maybe are tricky though, because they were a quarterback away. Peyton shows up, and it's like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah,
well, and this quarterback away.
And I think that's part of that is though you have to be really sure of your evaluation of yourself. Like your self scout is such an important piece of this, as you guys know, because, you know, George Payton, I think they had a little bit dabbled in the Matthew Stafford thing when he took over in 2021, right? Like they were kind of in the early talks about maybe getting involved there. And then the Rams get him obviously and turn around and go win the Super Bowl in his first year. So that was kind of part of the thinking, right? Of like, hey, look what they did. Now, Denver's talent wasn't anywhere near what the Rams was. And I think they over evaluated it, quite frankly. And that's kind of how you end up in that situation.
So I have a 2-pronged question for you as we spin this forward. You know, a season prediction time for everyone. You know, this is the time everyone's 0-0. It's kind of the greatest time in our biz, right? Because no one's like really punted on hope quite yet. So, Nick, what do you expect from the Broncos this season, and how is that perhaps similar or different from what the Broncos' expectations are for themselves this year?
Yeah, I expect them to win about 6 or 7 games this year. I think this is a team that they won 8 last year. They won 8-9. And you could look at it 2 ways. You could say, hey, well, if they hadn't started 1-5, then they would have been a playoff team. They didn't adjust well to whether it was Sean Payton, whether it was their schedule, whatever the case might have been. They got off to a horrible start. Had they not done that, they would have been in the playoffs. But they also relied on just a flurry of turnover luck to win 5 games in a row and get to 8-9. And then you washed out a ton of veteran players that helped you get to that. Russell Wilson, Justin Simmons, Jerry Jeudy, Josie Jewell, Lloyd Cushenberry, Tim Patrick didn't play last year, but he's been a guy that's helped this team. Like, you just completely move on from a lot of these guys. And a lot of that is tied to the dead money they had to hit by releasing Russ. But it was also Sean just kind of wanting to completely do it his own way. And so for me to think that there won't be a pretty significant step back with that, even if they're being, I think, a little more long-term healthy in their outlook, I think it would be naive. They don't agree. They think that they think that the continuity that they have on both sides of the ball, both scheme and coaching wise, some of the personnel carryover. They still have veterans on the defensive side of the ball who started to get better toward the second half of last year in Vance's scheme. All those things they think will make them. And then Payton, obviously, at least publicly, has just put out a lot of outward confidence that Bo Nix can be better for them at the quarterback position than they had last year. History suggests that's not going to be the case, given what rookies do. But, that's kind of where they're at. So I would say that our outlook is a little bit different between mine and what they have internally.
Chris, I'm gonna have Nick give us the number, but I was curious if you know it before. Do you know the dead money hit that they took on Russ?
I know it's hella money, a lot of money. Was it $50 million?
Go ahead and tell him, Nick.
Yeah, it's total 85 over 2 years. So that number.
Oh my god!
That number really smacks you upside the head, man.
But yeah,
they took. I'm not smart enough to know exactly how each of these like options in the contract work, but they basically had their choice of taking the bigger chunk of that this season or taking the bigger chunk next year. They chose to manipulate the contract to take the $53 million this year. And just like, here's what's wild about that, right? $53 million is the largest dead money hit ever for a single player. It beats Matt Ryan. I think it was a $40 million hit with the Falcons. And it's only part of the hit. It's like 60-something% of the hit. So it's just like, it really is wild. It's strapped them. I think the Broncos are tied for the lowest with the Raiders in terms of like actual cash being spent on actual players on the roster this year, like $219 million. So like it changed what they were able to do. And that's again, the roster. I think they've started some long-term healthy habits with how they're building it, but there's just not, when you take that kind of hit, you sacrifice some of the talent you're going to be able to go out and get.
Hate's a strong word, but you cannot tell me that Sean Payton has any feelings of love or like for Russell Wilson. That is insane. Think about that.
Yeah, man. Yeah. To be willing, because that's what, a lot of people said, like, just look, I mean, Russ threw 26 touchdowns last year. He threw I believe 8 interceptions. Statistically, middle of the road. Now his advanced, like his EPA, stuff like that, I think was still in the 20s, like 24 range. And they were really bad in the red zone. But like, man, yeah, grit your teeth and bear it for another year so that you're a little bit healthier going forward. But yeah, you're right, man, Christopher. It just speaks to, I think it speaks quite a bit to him viewing that relationship ultimately as just an untenable. And I'm not sure that he ever was truly open-minded to having it work. He kind of chided Russ in his own sarcastic way, but I remember I think he gets the job, then he goes to do the Super Bowl with Fox. So he's down at Media Row in Phoenix, and he's talking to people down there. And he's obviously getting asked about Russ, like, how's this relationship going? And he talks about how they went out to dinner. And at that dinner though was Joe Montana. And Sean essentially says, like, Russ is sitting here, he's asking me about what the offense is going to look like. We're trying to talk about it. And I'm like, hey man, I'm sitting here next to Joe Montana. Like I'm trying to have this conversation. So like from the very beginning, he's like, it just had that vibe where it was like, he doesn't really, view this as a long-term partnership. And if you approach it that way, again, I don't think there was anything, I don't want to say there was nothing Russ could have done, but it just seemed from the very start, like, that it wasn't going to work. And the only question was whether they're going to be able to be willing to eat that kind of money. And obviously they were.
Gee. Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of. I wanted to see Chris when he hears the number, because
No,
you
that
can
was
know the
great.
number, but when you hear it, you're just like,
You feel
hey,
it. You feel
yeah, man. That's
Yeah.
that's a hell of a number. And another, speaking of numbers, one I enjoyed that you provided, because I was thinking about that when I was kind of previewing this matchup, is you talked about how many guys, or you wrote about how many guys were on that are on the team now, played, were on the active roster with the Seattle game. I believe it was in the range of 25%, which is, that game wasn't that long ago.
Right.
A lot of roster churn. I wish I did more research to have Seattle's number. I believe it's a little higher though than that, because 25 in the 25% range is pretty low. But I bring that up to say, or to ask, as Sean Payton and the general manager have reshaped this roster. I know you have to get younger and cheaper when you eat a dead money hit, but beyond youth, perhaps, what type of identity or perhaps maybe commonality have you found in the way that they've put this thing together?
Yeah, I think they have made the investment on the offensive and defensive lines in ways that we hadn't really seen with this team ever since Manning retired. Every new general manager, every coach that comes in talks about building a team from the inside out, but they've actually done that in a way that I don't think the Broncos had been committed to doing. Sorry, as my cat tries to climb in the way here. That the Broncos have been committed to doing. He goes out his first free agency. He signs Mike McGlinchey at right tackle, probably in an overpay. Ben Powers at left guard. They just gave a long-term contract to Quinn Miners, one of the rising young right guards in this league. And then defensively, this offseason, they went out and they traded for John Franklin Myers. They signed Malcolm Roach. Really kind of renovated that defensive line, and that's sort of been kind of what they've been trying to do. So I think that part of it is sort of easy to detect. And then outside of that, it is trying to trying to get younger. This was an aging roster, and when you look at that and say, part of it is like, why do we have so many guys on this team who have been here for so long and yet we haven't been able to win? They just kind of felt like they needed to not clean house totally, but yeah, to your point, there's only 14 guys on this team now that played in that game 2 years ago. Actually, 15 if you include Cody Barton.
That's right. We'll get to, now we have to get to Cody.
Now we have to get to Cody.
Now we have to. We've teased it. We also teased a little bit the Bo Nix hype train. I am fascinated by the work being done, or seemingly being done. I'm projecting there, from the Broncos building here, because I feel like whenever people visit, people go on these training camp tours and they go watch. They're not there that long. You know how it goes. They pop in. National people pop in for a day max, 2 days if it's joint practices, and they have all these takes and columns and whatever. And it feels like, though, consistently at our company or anywhere else, when people have shown up to the Broncos camp, they come away with Bo Nix is the second coming. And, I don't watch Bo Nix. That's why we have you. We're gonna ask about it. But it does feel like the hype train is left the station and it's churning. But before we get to the hype itself, though, just Nick, where are you on Bo Nix before his regular season debut?
I think the thing about Bo that I was unsure about, like, going into this, was just like, just sort of the overall athleticism and his arm strength. And that, to me, when I kind of looked ahead of this to the draft, that was like the big question that I have. And there's times where you certainly see the athleticism. Like, I think that has been more prevalent than I imagined. And I think it will sort of ultimately show that they run the ball with him a lot more than maybe they did even last year with Russell Wilson, when they added some design runs. Sean Payton did with Russ. But the arm strength, to me, is like kind of come and go. Like, there are times where you really see it. There's other times where you feel like he's really having to put a lot behind the ball. And as those windows start to shrink with the talented defenses he's going to be playing as soon as Sunday, I just need to see that. Like, I need to be able to kind of see that is going to be a bar that he's able to meet consistently. But some of the other stuff, I think the way that he's kind of come in and been able to, just call the offense, some of those like baseline things that you wonder about with rookies, that stuff has all been positive. And his game performances were solid. But yeah, I would agree with you that, like, there just seems to be no in between. It's at first he gets here and you're just like, oh, we're not sure. And now a couple of good games, and it's just like, this guy, to your point, is gonna is going to be the guy that resurrects the franchise. That's why I'm eager to just see it, see him and how he handles it, because everything has been talked about, his poise, his maturity, his calm. Well, we're going to see obviously on Sunday in that environment whether those things translate.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope he's mature. I think Bo's like old enough to run for president. Like he was in college for a long time. You know, I don't know if you guys have seen this on Twitter, X or whatever. The people are like, when someone signs somewhere, they'll post highlights, but intentionally it's like satire. They'll post old highlights.
Yeah,
you know, it's like
right.
I think Dalvin Cook just signed with the Cowboys, for instance, and it was like, oh, the Cowboys got a great backfield, and it's like Dalvin Cook highlights from like 2018 or something. Like that.
right.
Like, someone did something like that with Bo, and it was like, I forget who he was going against at Auburn, but whoever that person or that team was, it was like they had people who've been in the league for a while, and I was just thinking, how old is this guy?
Yeah.
You know, he's an older rookie for sure, but
like they've teased him. The only saving grace. The only saving grace that Bo Nix has, because he's 24. And teammates have razzed him about that. Luckily for him, the Broncos drafted a guy this year, Devon Vele out of Utah, who's 26 years old. He'll turn 27 this year. So like Bo kind of gets let off the hook a little bit because, you know, he can just pass those burns along.
So shout out to the good folks at Scoop City. I was watching their interview with Diana Rossini and Chase Daniel. They were talking with Sean Payton, and he said something very fascinating. You can tell Sean is part of this like hype train too, by the way. Chris, I don't know how much you've seen of like some of these hot takes about Bo, like, but Nick's right. It is like by comparison, for instance, to like what's coming out of New England, you would think like Drake May is like the worst quarterback ever, and you would think Bo Nix is going to lead the Broncos to the Super Bowl. It is just, it's unbelievable. But you can see by listening to Sean how much these sit downs that people are doing with Sean, you know, or whoever else in the building are helping. But one thing that was interesting that he said in that particular sit down with Diana and Chase was that when they were evaluating quarterbacks pre-draft, they took out like some of the stuff that's not real quarterbacky, you know, like bubble screens and some of the gimmicky stuff that manufactures completions. And they were like, let's evaluate on that, you know. And then they, you know, Sean rattled out all these things like he was number one in this or number two in that, so to speak. And I was like, oh, that's great, you know, because that was my skepticism with Bo. I was like, you can't dink your dunking way through success in the NFL. But then I watched the preseason games. I know, Nick, you did as well. And that's exactly what it looked like, you know, for the most part. In particular, the Packers game where it's little screens here, little, you know, sticks and hitches here, you know. So my question to you is, has that been the case in camp too, or is perhaps even letting it fly a little bit more, you know, with the practices that you've been able to see?
No, I think largely his performance and what they did with him in camp resembled what they were doing in those two preseason games. I mean, if you look at it, his biggest completions in the preseason came off of you know, either broken plays or kind of design rollout type stuff. Like I think his first completion against the Colts in his opener was 3rd and 10. He faked a handoff and then rolled left and then threw to Courtland Sutton for a 22-yard gain. That has been interesting to me, is like he's pushing the ball down the field more when he gets out of the pocket versus like when he's in the pocket, it is these just kind of really quick, you know, the hitches, the over the ball routes and all that kind of stuff. But so to me, like their key is like being able to run the football more effectively so that they can actually open up those things that he can do and push the field down with in sort of a more advantageous way, because, you know, it's hard to do that in the preseason because you're not sitting there and pounding the ball and trying to set up this or set up that. You're just kind of going. And so that's like what the vision is, because that's where he has shown I think the most proficiency in terms of pushing the ball down the field is when he's able to get out, able to kind of see the field, use his legs. But yeah, you got to be able to do that from the pocket too. There's been plays here and there where you see it, but I'm with you. That goes back to like what I think I need to see in order to be, you know, even getting close to the same train that they're on, is just because you have to be able to do that consistently from the pocket.
Now I'm still on a buzz about $83 million of dead money. But we're gonna 85 to be exact. But we're gonna move on
this year. Yeah,
we're gonna move on from that. And clearly, whatever Russ was trying to do, it wasn't complimenting what Sean Payton had in mind. So how does Bo Nix complement what Sean Payton is looking to do offensively? I know you mentioned some of the intangibles with the screen game and being able to run the football, but what else really stands out to you that says, you know what, Sean Payton loves this kid and he's going to make it work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like some of it is just like personality, right? Like he and Russ just like personality wise just weren't all that similar, and so I think he wanted somebody that, you know, Sean loves to talk about being in the office late by candlelight, drawing up plays until whenever. Bo Nix was a guy that when they evaluated it during this process found that he keeps coaches hours. Like he's the guy that's going to be in there. And I don't know how involved you want a rookie to be in the actual like formation of a game plan. That's something I'm interested to learn a little bit more about. But I think just like talking quarterback and evaluating it in that way is something that Sean Payton liked about him. You know, the processing of information, all that kind of stuff. You know, that's all been a part of it. I still think though it's a work in progress. I mean, Bo had 5 different play callers during his time at Auburn, or during his time in college, rather. Three at Auburn and 2 different play callers at Oregon. This is going to be his first chance since he played high school football for his dad for 5 years to actually kind of have the same play caller, the same, you know, coach theoretically, right? Now, I mean, if this goes off the rails, Sean's vulnerable just like anybody else, but has that opportunity to have that sort of thing. And I'm going to be really curious to see how that evolves because I think it's still kind of early.
Perfect. And then Seahawks run defense. Oh, it's been awful for the last few seasons. And I think with Mike McDonald, they're still trying to figure things out, but I would imagine, as Mike would always say, can't get much worse. All right. So I'm expecting it not to get much worse. But when you look at the Denver Broncos offensive line, how well do you think this offensive line will be this season? And what are expectations going into Sunday's game? I'm assuming they're going to try to test that run defense for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting. Like one of the biggest things, and this actually is another thing about Bo that they liked, was Sean just feels like they took way too many sacks last year. And you know, Russ, he played 30 games with Denver. He took 100 sacks. You guys know that's Oof. It was, yeah, even for him, it was a lot, but you guys that's part of his game. Like you're going to have that, like, but the difference sort of just became that he can, I mean, gosh, I remember watching even in that early 22 season, you know, he takes some of those sacks that kind of make you pull out your hair, and it's already 2nd and 22, like in the first quarter, but then he'll do something crazy to bail you out of that. And so that the reaction to the sacks, just, it wasn't the same as it had been when he was younger. And so you just ended up getting put in all these sorts of situations. But it's kind of funny in retrospect because the Broncos feel really good about their offensive line. They think like advanced metrics wise, it graded out well. They like what they're seeing, but at the same time, like it's still a lot of these guys that gave up 55 sacks last year. And Sean Payton said this offseason, like more or less said, I think most sacks are on the quarterback. He doesn't miss a chance to slight Russ, but you know, but that was the thing about Bo, you know, he took 5 sacks a year ago. And as much as like, I don't think you can fully build an offense on dink and dunk. I think he wants dink and dunk over sack more frequently than they had a year ago because they were just in so many adverse situations. But it's a group that still has to show it. They didn't run the ball as effectively as they should have last year. It was supposed to kind of be their identity, and it never really materialized. Part of that was Javonte Williams, you know, was still coming off that injury. He wasn't himself a year ago. They think he lost 12 pounds. I think he's a lot better this year. But again, it all goes back to that kind of it's training camp. It's the preseason. If he can kind of get back to that guy he was as a rookie when he had 1,200 total yards of offense in 21, you know, they might have something there. They drafted Audric Estime out of Notre Dame. So they have some pieces, but that is another work in progress, I would say, to identify whether they really can be that kind of team.
I'm not sure you can get any more offensive liney with this name of Ben Powers. That's a pretty unique name for an offensive lineman. I'm assuming he's pretty good.
Yeah, he's good. And then Miners on the other side. That's the guy that they just gave the extension to. But the key question on the offensive line is they had Lloyd Cushenberry, who had been their starter ever since he was drafted in the 3rd round in 2020. He had his best season last year and basically priced himself out of Denver with the kind of the financial restraints they were going to have this offseason, signed a big deal with the Titans. And now Luke Wattenberg, University of Washington alum, is the guy that won the job for the Broncos this year. So that's another one to watch of how effective is he going to be.
The way we can move on to other guys in the offense now, but the way there's something you mentioned about Sean and his not clicking with Russ, and he seems to click a lot more with Bo. I mean, Bo hasn't done anything bad yet, so we'll see. But just the way, like you mentioned that story about him being at the Super Bowl Radio Row. I remember he said something about Russ just stop kissing babies and acting like he's running for president. It just was just very toxic. Very toxic.
Yeah.
I'm glad that Bo, to the point that Tua Tagovailoa just kind of talked about with Brian Flores, Bo seems to have gone into a more healthier situation. Because as much as these guys are grown men and football's, a pretty violent sport with a lot of yelling and cussing at folks and everything and some degrading language, the quarterbacks are almost like their separate little entity there. You kind of do got to treat them with kid gloves to stroke their egos a little bit. Because once that's gone, it's really hard to get back. Not to say you can't get it back, but you cook a quarterback's ego, particularly when he's young, it can be really hard to overcome. Like Tua. I think that's what Tua was kind of getting.
It's such a good point, man. It's such a good point, and it started last year with Russ. Like, obviously they told him, they came to him in the middle of the season and said they wanted him to push back the injury guarantee in his contract, and if he did that, that would be give him a better path toward being on the team in 2024 and all that kind of stuff. This was a guy that they had just given a 5-year, $242 million extension to. And, so there was that. There was, he, to your point, yelled at him in Detroit in that primetime game in December, just went after him on the sideline. It's just, you don't see that with coach and quarterback very often. So yeah, I think toxic, that I think is a good descriptor of the way that it felt. Hopefully just both guys are in a better spot, because who wants to go to work like that every day?
Yeah, no, that's tough. That stands out. As much as I think it's kind of funny what Sean is and people in the building clearly seem to be doing to kind of push Bo's confidence, whether it's real or like manufactured, there's value in it either way, I think, because of how important that is for young quarterbacks. Let's talk about one of the guys who's going to be throwing to, when in preparation for the show, I was like, damn, Courtland Sutton did all that last year. Good for him. Because I just only remember him making a bunch of toe tap catches. I didn't remember all, he was really productive, a lot of touchdowns last year. What can you tell us about what we can expect from him, particularly on Sunday? And then maybe what else we can expect from the rest of that unit?
Yeah, I mean, he's their guy now. There's no doubt about it. And he knows that after they traded Jerry Jeudy in March, Courtland Sutton, he was dealing with overcoming like a minor ankle surgery that he had right after last season, but stayed in Florida throughout OTAs to work out on his own, which he had never done previously in his career, all while trying to angle for a new contract. He went into this season with 2 years left on his deal, but only $2 million guaranteed for this year, nothing for next year. And wanted a new deal. Ultimately, they gave him about $1.5 million in reachable incentives on this year's contract as sort of a concession. But look, he's highly valuable to this team. And Diana Rossini had a report the other day that said San Francisco was willing to give the Broncos a 3rd round pick for Sutton if they were going to trade Ayuk to Pittsburgh. Sean Payton said that was a stretch that never got that far, but clearly he's a guy that they've had calls about and have had an opportunity to move. But with a rookie quarterback, Sutton really is the guy. They traded Jerry Jeudy. They went out and they signed Josh Reynolds from Detroit, who obviously is a solid player, has played in a similar system there under Dan Campbell. But outside of that, there's just nothing proven in that receiving core. They hope Marvin Mims, the 2nd-year player, the speedster, is going to be, kind of go from, big play guy periodically to a little bit more of a consistent threat. They drafted Troy Franklin out of Oregon. They drafted, mentioned Vele, who's actually been the better player of the two, even though Franklin was drafted in the 4th round. So we'll see. I mean, they believe that they had a deep receiving core and had tough decisions to make there. But yeah, Sutton has to have a big year in my mind in order for Nix to have a big season, because he's without a doubt their top target.
You mentioned Marvin Mims, and are they featuring him in practice? Are you able to see, okay, I like how they're using him, and he's shown explosiveness and he is ready for the matchup Sunday, because the Seahawks definitely have improved in that defensive back room, and they're probably going to be a top unit in this league if healthy. So I'm curious if Marvin is ready to take that next step and if you've seen it.
Yeah, that's going to be an awesome matchup for them to face that kind of secondary early on. I mean, just another part of the challenge of what Bo faces on Sunday. But it was weird. Like, I didn't really necessarily see that from Marvin, and it wasn't him. It was almost kind of weird, as if they were trying to hide some of the stuff with him. Like, he was a Pro Bowl returner last year. He barely did any returning this offseason. And we know some of these coaches are being really coy about how they're going to institute their plans with these new kickoff rules and all that kind of stuff. But really wasn't featured a lot in that way during camp or the preseason. And the same went for his, him as a receiver. He did have a touchdown catch, off a 1 yard catch from Nix, off of a motion play at the goal line. That was nice. But in terms of the big down the field stuff, haven't seen it. So I can only assume that they've kept some stuff, under wraps. I don't really know how you can train for it if we actually don't see a whole lot of it. But that was the thing with him that was interesting last year, because he got off to such a big start. He had a game against Washington and in week 2 where he went off. He had 113 yards within like the first quarter and a half, and had a huge catch to help them beat the Bears in week 4. Was just off to a great start, and then really got kind of lost in the shuffle as the season went on. And Sean said that part of trading Jerry Jeudy was to open up more of a slot for Marvin Mims. So I'm just as eager to see that as you are, because I don't know. I didn't see as much of it as I maybe thought we would see in training camp, and I don't know whether that was anything going on with him because he's healthy and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really interested to see how that one goes down on Sunday.
Yeah, it's hard when you are looked at as a return specialist to then be asked to do more, and it just can get tricky because the Seahawks have tried that with D. Eskridge. Obviously, I think injuries played more of a role with him being pretty much he's not a Seahawk anymore in this regard. So it just never really worked out because of injuries, but he was brought in as someone that was a return specialist. He can make one play, could be a touchdown, but he just never found the footing. So that'll definitely be interesting to see. But let's spin it to the defensive side, because the Seahawks, as we talked about it off wax, the Seahawks they know who Vance Joseph is. They've seen him in Arizona for the last few seasons, and they played against him, I think, when he was with Denver the first time, if I'm not mistaken. But nonetheless, y'all last season got 70 points dropped on y'all by the Miami Dolphins. All offense, no special teams, nothing crazy, all offense. And then a few weeks later, you face the Chiefs and don't give up a touchdown. I don't understand how that happens. I've never seen nothing like that before. But when you look at what this Seahawks offense is trying to do with Ryan Grubb and DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, JSN, who seems to be going to have a breakout season, how does Vance game plan for it? And do you see a similarity where they try to, I don't know what they did in that Kansas City game, and you would know more about it, but what do you envision Vance trying to do to slow down this new offense? Because obviously the only thing you can do is go back and watch tape at UW, but is that enough?
Yeah, no, it's going to be tough. And one of the real question marks for Denver is how are they going to communicate in the back end? Obviously, Justin Simmons was on this team and as a starter since 2017. I think nobody in the league has more interceptions than he did since entering in as a third-round pick in 2016, 30 interceptions. He has been the kind of voice in the back end of their defense for a really long time, and they moved on from him. That was part of kind of reading that safety market that we all saw collapse a little bit this back in March, and he only had 1 year left on his deal, no guaranteed money, and that was all part of, again, sort of the Russ stuff, the $85 million in dead money. That was all part of it. So now they have a safety group that's really kind of unproven. You have Brandon Jones as the guy that they signed. Had some nice years in Miami. But kind of played in a few sort of different roles. I think they're going to have him playing a little bit more up this year. And then PJ Locke is a guy who joined the Broncos as an undrafted free agent in 2019 and has sort of slowly built himself up to be the guy back there. But then you're going to have probably a first-time starter in Riley Moss on the outside. So it's like they have a lot of these pieces where they're going to be kind of integrating guys into new roles. And part of the reason that they really struggled early last season was because they were just a mess in the back end. Simmons was hurt. He didn't play in that Miami game. But they were just sort of a mess there. They had made some of the wrong personnel decisions. Damari Mathis was a second-year guy that they started outside. He really struggled. So they brought in Fabian Moreau, the veteran. And then at nickel, I don't know why Jaquan McMillan didn't win the job because he had a great camp. But they put Isang Bassi in as the nickel, and ultimately just he really struggled. So they put in McMillan, and he was off to the races, had a great season. So they're just incorporating once again some new stuff. And I do think there's going to probably be some growing pains, especially when you account for the fact that Brandon Jones missed most of training camp with a hamstring injury. He didn't play in the preseason, is only just now starting to get back. And so that's such a position where you're coming into a new defense and you're supposed to be one of the central hubs of communication. I think there's rightfully some concern as to whether, that component of their defense is going to be able to hum early. But I think overall, they kind of changed to more of a one gap scheme along the defensive line. Cause like the Seahawks, man, the Broncos just kind of really got beat up there. Zach Allen, who's played there a lot as a former Cardinal. He had a nice year, but he was really all they had. And it was very easy to kind of isolate, double team him. He just got nonstop center sliding protections his way all of last season because they just didn't have a whole lot else. So they're really excited about the additions that they made on the defensive line. We'll just have to see how it all comes together.
Can I tell a Riley Moss thing really quick?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Well, so I'm a big fan is probably not the right word, but just like I pay close attention to like pre-draft language and how we stereotype the player guy gets drafted, he's white, he plays receiver, all his comps are Jordy Nelsons and Wes Welkers, right? Because we just can't imagine the skill set to fit on a black player, and then we do the same thing, all the black quarterback comps are other black quarterbacks, even if they don't play anything, like them, which we see quite a bit. So I pay attention to all this stuff. Anytime like a white guy has a really nice run, it's like, ooh, he's sneaky athletic, or deceptively athletic, or deceptive speed is the hashtag that I write. So I pay attention to this stuff. Anyways, I'm at the Senior Bowl first time. This was the 2023 Senior Bowl. Yeah, 2023 Senior Bowl. I'm there, first time in Mobile, sitting in the bleachers watching practice with everyone else, and I see this cornerback. And some guys are wearing certain gear, so you can't really see like anything. They got gloves on, they got the leg sleeves now, how the kids do, kids these days anyway. So I'm looking, and I see his cornerback, and I'm looking at his legs, so he has shorts on, and I can't remember, I think I was sitting next to our Vikings guy, Alex, and I remember saying, Alex, hey, yo, is that a white guy? At corner, he would know for sure, because we were sitting in the bleachers, and I'm just like, yo, I think that's a white corner. And, because I didn't study the roster too much before you go. I got the little sheet in my hand. I'm like, all right, who's like 33 on the national team or whatever he was? I'm like, Riley Moss. Okay. Iowa. Okay. That checks out. Let me Google. They haven't got their pictures. Cause I'm like, I don't know all these college kids, right? Nick knows we're traveling on Saturdays. Yeah. In the college football season. And when we got a home game, I like to spend time with my family or kick it.
That's what I do. Yeah.
So I'm not watching the Big Ten noon kickoff. Right? I don't know about Iowa. So I'm like, all right, Riley Moss. I'm like, oh, that is. So then I just spent like the whole day watching him. This was the first day of practice. I'm like, yo, he's nice. And then they keep track on the video board at the Senior Bowl during practices, like the guys who have like the top speed and some other stuff. And he like had the top speed of the day. I'm like, yo, I'm blown away. White corner. And he's a fast white corner too. So, he's not just like gym rat guy. That's the other language they use. Gym rat, high IQ, real coachable, all this other coded stuff. It's super funny to just look back on. So I ended up watching this guy the whole day. I didn't put him in my notes and stuff after because the Seahawks, I didn't think needed a corner. And they ended up going to take Devin Witherspoon. But I didn't think they needed one. But I remember I walked up to Riley after the last day of practice. So I think like Thursday or something. I was on the field, we're supposed to be interviewing guys. I think I might have interviewed a couple of guys. But I just remember walking up and being like, hey, man, you keep doing you. Like, you keep doing your thing. I don't know him well enough to be like, hey, man, don't let him move you to safety, which is what I really wanted. What I really wanted to say. Because I was like, I could see it happening. And I was like, what, do you? So when you just mentioned him now, and Chris had put him in our show notes today, I had completely forgot he went to Denver. Yeah. And now I'm super hyped. So tell us, what can we expect from? He's my boy now. That's my boy. I only met him the one time. He's my boy. What can we expect from my boy Riley?
Yeah,
on Sunday.
There's nothing deceptive about Riley Moss's speed, man. The dude is just fast. Like he, and that was what they were enamored with him. That's the reason they were so enamored with him. They took him in the 3rd round and gave up a 3rd round pick in this year's draft in order to move up and take him. He's a guy that he was a really good hurdler in high school. I think he won the Drake relays, which I'm not a big track guy, but I know it's a prestigious track event where you have high school and college and amateur racers and stuff like that. Was a really good hurdler. And so I was actually doing a story on him this week that there's like this translation between like the work that you do as a hurdler, the way that you stretch, the way that you prepare your hips to be able to get over the hurdles really translates well to how a cornerback has to rotate when he plays. And so it's been sort of like this seamless thing for him. He has a lot of natural ability in that way. And last year he was hurt during training camp. And so really never had a chance to go out and win the starting job because they needed an outside corner last year. Ever since Pat Surtain got here, people will be like, how come he only has, two interceptions this season and or one the next? Well, it's because they don't ever have to throw to him because they've been able to attack all these guys on the other side, this revolving door of corners. So they're really hopeful that Moss can kind of, put a plug in that carousel and be the guy that holds down that position. And he had a great camp just in terms of, he's just always on guys. And he's not the most perfectly, technique savvy guy, but he recovers so well. That's one thing that really pops out to me. So like it's hard to beat him deep because even if you win the move, he's really good at reacting. So again, I feel like I keep saying this about all these dudes, but another guy I didn't see a whole lot last year, who's also walking into a huge test, like you guys mentioned with the receivers they have.
If I remember correctly, I believe that the pick that they gave up to get him was with the Seahawks. I believe.
I think that's right.
Was.
Yeah. Good memory.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that they took Riley with the pick. I remember sitting in the draft room and being like, "Yo, that's my guy."
Why don't Seahawks just take my guy here? We should have just.
They took Spoon in that same draft. So I'm like, okay,
already had
another corner. And already had Reek. Yeah, so I was like, okay, that's. But I was like, and they already were paying a lot for safeties at the time because I'm thinking that everybody's gonna move Riley to safety. I just felt, but I feel like he's a trailblazer in that way.
I don't think he's big enough to play safety either. Like he's kind of a slight guy. Like he's not super big. I mean, I know you can put weight on a guy and all that kind of stuff, but he really is just a natural corner. Like he plays that position well. So I'm excited to see him play.
6 foot 193 is what his combine or his relative. I'm looking at his relative athletic score stuff. 4.45 guy at 193 pounds. Good for him. Good for him, man. I want guys like him and what's my man? The other kid from Iowa. Cooper DeJean. Yeah. I want these guys to play their natural spots, like Nick said. Play a natural spot. Yeah. We don't got to come to the racial stereotypes. The white guys can play corner too. They can. Go. I'm excited to see it, man. I had forgot. I get caught up on all this stuff all summer. When Chris put it in the show notes, I'm like, yo, my boy.
You mentioned the stereotype. I've now had to hear the name Jason Sehorn so many times since Riley Moss got drafted. So
yeah, one of the legends.
That's how far back though it goes. Though it shouldn't be like there's a lot of natural athletes here. And I also would love before we move on to talking a little bit about Patrick is just I would love for like Iowa to have its second niche to be the white corners, putting them in the NFL because they got the tight end thing going. They've nailed that. For them to just now Iowa becomes like
white corner you.
White corner you. Like that's a Netflix doc waiting to happen right there. I love that. So I can't wait for that. I wish this game was on national TV because I know they'd have like a graphics package of like all the white corner. You mentioned Jason Sehorn, like they would have all these white corners up. It'd be absolutely hilarious. I want to talk about a little bit about the guy playing opposite him. And Patrick Surtain, who's one of my favorite corners to watch. I love when the Broncos had a bazillion national TV games Russ's first year. So it was cool that he was getting some spotlight. I feel like the Broncos were the only game on in 2022 at least like 6 times before Christmas.
Oh, I know. That's what made it so much worse.
Yeah, it was like the Monday night game, the Sunday night game, a really bad Thursday night game against the Colts, I want to say, a London game. I was like, dog, this is force feeding us. The Broncos had us on Christmas. We're all watching the Broncos. Like, Jesus, man. Yeah, but like you said, that just made it worse. But anyway, as it pertains to Patrick, really happy that he'll get when he gets some shine on those national TV games. Looking it up, I watched his cut up from last year's game. All the targets that he got, it was a very brief cut up. It was like 6 targets, 6 catches for 35 yards, only 1 first down the whole game, and I think no targets in the fourth quarter. So the Seahawks know that. They know that he's going to be a tough guy to throw at. What have you seen, from him in camp, and what maybe can we expect from him on Sunday?
Yeah, it's funny because when you have a quarterback I guess the bummer and sometimes the maybe unintended consequence of when you have a quarterback competition is all those guys are trying not to make a mistake. They're trying not to throw an interception. They're trying not to do something that stands out as like a bad play. So what's one way to not throw an interception is let's just not throw at Pat Surtain during training camp. And I asked him, I'm like, dude, like, do you ever go to these guys and honestly say like, hey, I'm on your team too. Like, I need to work too. Like, let's go. And he said, yeah, like there is sometimes that conversation, but it just really didn't happen during camp. And then Green Bay shows up for a joint practice and he shuts it down. Like they finally go at him. They give him some work. And I think he deflected 3 passes, was just all over the place. I mean, he's just the prototypical guy in terms of like not giving you any space, always being on the ball. And yeah, you can look at the interception numbers. He only had 1 last year. But yeah, the game that you mentioned, I think it was, he gave it the only first down catch was early in the game, I think to DK Metcalf, like a 11 or 12 yard gain. And then after that was really all there was. And teams just don't typically try him. So I think he's poised to have another really big year. I mean, he's just kind of that guy. He's a bit of a machine out there.
The one first down was like a 3rd and 10, 15-yard catch, and it required such a good catch though. Like DK had to go.
Yeah, I remember that one, and he had to kind of rip
Patrick,
it.
Yeah, Patrick's all over. Like the Seahawks, they used to have, not anymore, but they used to have a big old photo of it in the building. It was such a good. But that was what was required to get a first down on this guy. And then say he's invincible, but that's the challenge. Of facing. I can't wait for that. Yeah, PS2 and my boy Riley. I just got hyped for this matchup.
Well, I love it. I mean, you got 3 of the best. I mean, like 3 of the game's best young corners, or just corners overall, and Witherspoon and Reek and Pat Surtain, and then we have Riley Moss, who's basically making his this is gonna be his first start at corner.
Debut.
So
wow,
his debut, because he got in a couple games defensively last year, typically as a dime backer, and then was the gunner on special teams. That was basically his rookie year. So this is his first real game with that kind of role. So yeah.
Dang, I wish I had field access, man. I go say what up to my guy again. We got it my first year when I was with the Seattle PI. I was able to go on the field and they just cut it. Maybe I blew it, and maybe that was my fault. Haven't been on the field pregame since here. Chris, all right, is it time? We teased Cody earlier. You want to throw a Cody question in here
real quick? Cody, a lot of Seahawks fans are probably like, Chris, what are you talking about? I watched the film. He improved.
Cody's your boy, Chris. He's your boy.
Because he just got better. I will go back and watch tape. The first couple of weeks with the Seahawks, he struggled. They was running at him, throwing everything at him. He couldn't handle anything. And then as the season progressed, he got better. And he got so good that against Tom Brady, he made a deflection because he had gotten so good at learning and studying film. He just improved. So real quick, I'm going to time you on this. You got 1 minute. How much has Cody Barton improved? What have you liked from him so far through training camp going into the season?
Well, improved enough to where he was like the no doubt guy to start next to Alex Singleton when it comes to this game. I mean, and he entered it in a competition with Jonas Griffith, who had been around with the Broncos since 21, but missed last year due to an ACL injury, and unfortunately suffered another one right at the end of training camp this year. But yeah, I mean, I think he just continued to get better. The funny thing was when they signed him, and then I saw the schedule, like he made the tackle really that kind of wrecked that last drive for Denver that forced them to settle for 46 left hash. It was
right.
He got Javonte Williams in the backfield, I think on a screen play, or it was a 4-yard loss that kind of completely, threw off Denver's rhythm after that. Huge hit. And I think he had another big play late in that game. So yeah, he was a guy that I remember just from that game alone when he signed with them. I think he's been solid. Josie Jewell is a guy had been here playing with Alex Singleton the last 3 years. They had built something good, but they could not afford Jewell after the big what was now Christopher, what was the money that they had to take?
Oh my gosh, $85 million.
85 million. They couldn't re-sign Josie Jewell, so Cody Barton it is.
All right, Nick, we're gonna get you out of here with we're gonna have you pick an over-under, and then we're gonna have you do a game prediction. Our over-under, I mentioned Pat Surtain stats last year against DK, 6 targets, 6 catches, 35 yards. Let's start with the over-under, Pat Surtain versus DK. Considering last year, 2 years ago's line, we could put the over-under on catches allowed at 3.5. What you got?
Is that just for DK Pat matchup?
Yes, just for DK. Just for DK. Last time it was 6 for 6.
Okay. I'll go over. I think they trust enough that you can test him with a guy DK's size and be able to pick up, moderate gains. So I'd say he gets 4 or 5 catches in those matchups. So I'll go over.
All right. And you are our first season prediction beat writer of the season. I am excited. Nick, give us a score for a Sunday season opener. Seahawks hosting the Broncos again.
Yeah. Rookie's first start, Lumen Field. A defense, like I mentioned, I'm a little bit concerned about what they have going in the secondary. I'm going to say 24 to 13. I think it's going to take this offense for Denver some time. I like Bo Nix, but he's not going to come out and throw 5 touchdowns in this game. I'll say 24 to 13. That's my prediction for Seattle.
All right.
There it is.
Wrote that down. I see it in the show notes. All right, Nick, we'll hold you to that. Maybe the Broncos will hold you to that. I don't know. Bo Nix goes for 5 touchdowns on Sunday.
Hey.
We need you back on.
Yeah, right.
You're doing the post-game pod with us.
Man.
That happens.
Hey,
sure.
I'm for it. I'm for it. I'll have plenty to write about. But I guess I have to be a pragmatist. I got to see it first.
Fair enough.
We're like that on this show as well, except for Riley. I'm all in. I don't need to see him do nothing else.
2 picks. Hey, he had a game in Iowa, two pick sixes in one game. So maybe that.
That'll be something to write about there.
Yeah.
Nick, we appreciate you joining us on the Seahawks Man to Man podcast. To our audience, YouTube, or audio, we appreciate you guys tapping in. Our first guests for the regular season. Congratulations, Nick. That's one hell of an honor.
It is,
to kick off 2024 with us. We thank you so much. Appreciate it. Chris, anything else before we get out of here?
Appreciate it again. Is there anything you want to plug before we let you go?
Not really. I mean, I've just been, you might know how it is. You're just grinding away. So there's all kinds of stuff. Go to theathletic.com/Broncos. I've been working my tail off. So you can find it all there.
There it is. Go check it out.
Appreciate you, Nick. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you guys after the game.
Yep. See you Sunday.